In several hours, our Board of Trustees will be meeting to discuss budget strategies. I hope the remarks that I will make to the trustees will also receive your careful scrutiny. In order to make them available to you, I'm recording my remarks now. I hope to stimulate your best thinking by sharing my own. I look forward to continuing to learn from you. Do share your thoughts with me. We have decisions to make about Western's future, decisions that depend upon predictions about the future. And as Mark Twain once said, it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. I will be sharing my predictions so that you may challenge them. And I will sketch a future for Western that those predictions drive me to. You may or may not agree. And even if you do agree, please realize this. A sketch is just that. It remains for us together to refine, to color in, to add depth, to bring to life. We do have to talk about budget, but we must also talk about vision, priorities, fairness, and courage. I begin at the state level with vision and priorities. When it comes to courage, I have in mind our courage here at Western to make the decisions that are best in the long run. So where is support for higher education in Washington going? Our state is hurting, no doubt. Did you know, though, that over the last decade, the state of Washington has been taking, through taxes, a smaller and smaller part of our hard-earned wages? State revenues, the red line, and state spending, the black line, have been declining as a percentage of our combined income. The tax burden has been dropping. Now, this graph is used, usually in partisan debate, by those holding the position that it is not a spending problem, but a revenue problem. I don't want to get into that partisan debate. I show you the graph for a different purpose. Have the people of Washington shown any inclination to alter our state's revenue structure to keep pace with personal income and with our shared public purposes? As you look at the line on the graph, do you have any reason to believe that it's going to change direction? It's also about vision. Does Washington still count itself able to challenge the globe? Or are we waving a white flag? It follows then that it is about priorities. What are the top means available for us to get us to our vision of a Washington that is committed and enabled to take on the best? What have the priorities been? The blue line is total state spending, largely dipping downward. The purple line, holding its own and then rising, is constitutionally protected K-12. The green line, dropping some and then growing, that's human services. The red line, dropping faster than all the others and then going off a cliff, that is higher education. It is about our vision for Washington and the means that will get us there. It is about priorities. Many have worked hard to influence priorities. But I must again ask that tough question. The picture you're now looking at, those lines on the graph, do you see them changing significantly in the years ahead? Revenues, vision, priorities. It's also about fairness, fairness for Western. State support for Western is way below average, even when measured only in the way below national average Washington context. Take a look at the graph. The green line is the average state support for students at Eastern, Central, and Evergreen. The blue line is average state support for Western students. This underfunding has been a problem for at least a decade. With the governor's proposed budget, it gets worse, to the tune of a shortfall of almost $17 million. Our leaders have been listening, but will we see another $17 million added to our budget? And even were that miraculously to happen, we would then simply be back in the same leaky boat with others including, as you may have noticed, our critical two-year college partners. We now have budget numbers from the governor, from the House, and from the Senate. We are a long ways from having a budget, though. As you can see, big tuition increases, much bigger cuts, and a net cut to Western that would be somewhere in the range of $9 million to $19 million, a huge range. And this is important to realize: nothing is yet settled. Our decisions today must be determined by where we want Western to be years from now. In planning how we're going to get to that future, we must consider the damage currently lurking in the numbers in that table. We also must consider the damage already done. That is a reason for including the orange column, the one with a net cut of $24 million that we are now implementing. What should our strategy be then? Strategies are strategic, but only if they are based upon an accurate view of future threats and opportunities. If not, they're wishful thinking, often dangerously wishful thinking. So what are the assumptions upon which we should build our strategies? We could assume that history will repeat itself. This is the now cliched observation that higher education is the state's rainy day fund. In tough times we are cut, but in better times the state puts money back in. That's been our strategy to date, planning for a tough 5 years. We are 3 years into that period right now, and then expecting history to repeat itself, to see the state's rainy day fund replenished. Think back to those opening graphs, though. Is that assumption valid? Suppose today's state support is the new normal, as good as it gets. Which assumption do we choose? There is uncertainty, but choose we must. And we must get it right, for we are betting the future of Western on the assumptions we go with. If we accept the new normal as the more accurate assumption, and I am now reluctantly but thoroughly convinced that that is the assumption we must make, then what are our options? The ones that initially occur to me are not pleasant to contemplate. As an in-demand campus, we could become elite serving. Quality is protected, and most every decision we make on programs, costs, student mix, tuition rates is driven by the need to maximize revenues relative to costs. We look and run much more like a private university. We could also protect quality by shrinking, but only if we shrink first our most expensive programs. Or we could become a mediocre regional university, watching time to degree grow, reliance on adjuncts increase, graduation rates drop, and student collaboration with outstanding faculty vanish. On this last option, by the way, please realize that if we stick with the history will repeat itself assumption and find out years later that we are wrong, that Washington does not fund us better to do what we are already doing, then we arrive precisely at that outcome, the mediocre regional university. I describe these options as unpleasant. And why do they so offend us? It's because we have a clear and simple vision to apply Western's considerable strengths toward building a stronger state of Washington. We have an equally compelling Western promise. Students working purposefully with outstanding faculty in the best undergraduate programs available in the state. Active minds, changing lives. Each of the options I have just sketched throws overboard the Western vision or the Western promise, or both. Are those our only options? More and more on campus, we've been using the term rebasing. We assume state support is not going to go back to where it once was. We adjust to that new base with the programs we can support on that new base. We phase out those programs that the new base will not support. We do so strategically, which means we are driven by a vision of applying our strengths to build a stronger state of Washington, and by keeping our promise to students of active minds, changing lives. If we find that new base, then what we continue to do, we will continue to do well. No more paying more for less. If we can find that new base, there's also an interesting irony. We started with the assumption of no new state funds. But in the future, if the state wants to invest in brighter futures, what university would be best positioned to deliver high quality and exceptional value? There are several big ifs in those last statements. If we can find the base. Let me add another if. If together we have the courage to do so. Can we find a new base that sustains our vision for Western, our promise to our students? Here I must take my head out of the clouds and return to budget prospects now before us. Rebasing is, of course, a rather bland term for decisions that will be very painful for our community as a whole, and of course for those who have dedicated their careers to excellence in programs that are no longer a part of the new base. Under the governor's budget, and to every audience I could find to listen, I have said that the net cut to Western is equal to the budgets of 3 of our 7 colleges. It is equivalent to laying off 20% of our faculty. We could eliminate all of our student and academic support services, admissions, counseling, the registrar, the financial aid office, tutoring services, and still not cover the cut. We have been heard. The House and Senate budgets are an improvement. If we look at the average of the House and Senate budgets, they are equivalent to the combined budgets of just 2 rather than 3 of our colleges, or laying off 12% of our faculty instead of 20%, or cutting out all building and grounds, repair, maintenance, remodeling, heating, and cleaning. So the situation remains very serious. Rebasing must be done carefully, thoughtfully, and with the engagement of the campus. Consequently, we have not been waiting for the governor to sign a final budget. For months, options have been developed, scrutinized, analyzed, painful options. As we get closer and closer to closure in Olympia, more and more of the campus has been involved. Once we have a final budget number, all can and must be involved. So what is my basic message in setting up the discussion for our trustees? Yes, our attention is necessarily riveted upon what is happening in Olympia. That must aggressively continue. We also need to look beyond to rebasing, in my opinion, for none of the other options are acceptable. And so I've sketched a future, as difficult as it may be to reach, that does not abandon our vision and our promise, and that tests not just our shared wisdom, but also our courage. I began with a quip about predictions being especially difficult where they involve the future. Mark Twain also once said, "Plan for the future, for that is where you will spend the rest of your life." I thank you for listening and look forward to hearing your thoughts.